Transformations rock, right fellas? Our hero with his back against the wall, digging deep inside himself, pause, to draw out the incredible power that he needs to save the day, or perhaps something a bit darker and sinister, having them lose control and possibly even become a threat to those around them. Or maybe it's not the hero at all, and instead it's an enemy spreading an intense feeling of despair when an already nigh insurmountable being begins to draw out even more power than before. Bonus points to guys like Frieza, who do that and then drop the knowledge that they've got even more in their bag, just to mess with the pro tags. Actually diabolical behavior. But, just like with 3 AM goon sessions with the homies, too much of a good thing can end up sucking the fun out of it. And possibly a secret other thing. When a show or game, especially gacha games, card games included, revolving around fights goes on for a long time, power creep becomes nearly inevitable. If the villains or stakes that the characters are fighting aren't ramping up in some way, it often feels like a waste of time because, well, we just went balls to the wall fighting such a powerful enemy. How can we just move backwards from that? But, before I expand on that, I want to state that this isn't 100% in my mind though. For example, take a look at My Hero. Season 4 of the anime is where a lot of people said they fell off with the series because they went from giant fights like All Might vs All for One and Deku vs Overhaul, that when the story flipped to a temporary lighter setting of having a school festival and fighting the villain of the arc, Gentle Criminal, who is admittedly much weaker than the previous villains. A lot of people were turned off by this. However, I couldn't disagree more. The stakes may not have been as high, sure, but the meaning of the arc was still important, and there was a reason why Deku considered Gentle to be the hardest person for him to fight, despite not nearly being the strongest. Sometimes it's just about telling a nice story, diving deeper into the characters and expanding on the world a bit over just continually ramping up the danger arc after arc. That's precisely how you end up with power creep issues, in fact. And not to say that MHA didn't end up with that problem anyways, but merely that constant ramping up the stakes will drive you into a wall at some point. And with series that have a transformation at the forefront of their hero's power boost rather early on, what do they do when that power ends up hitting a cliff against these newer foes? Just bust out another one, you dingus. Rinse and repeat until you're done with the story. Now, it may sound like I hate this kind of thing, but not all the time, truly. I'm a rather easy guy to please, so if you've got me saying that there's a bit of an issue here, you know something's up. Transformations or power boosts are hype as hell. I'm most certainly not immune to that feeling, but sometimes people use these kinds of things as a crutch for other development of their characters. And if you've seen the title of this video, you already know what series I'm going to be using as a main example: Dragon Ball. You've also probably seen the mention of a certain blue hedgehog in that title too, and don't worry, we'll get to him later. Let's turn the clock way back for a second, to OG Dragon Ball. Little boy Goku was a strong lad in his own right, but had the caveat of turning into a were-ape under a full moon. A transformation that falls under what we'll call the Berserk category of transformations. When Goku would become a great ape, he would attack anything and everything in sight, friend or foe, while growing his own power tenfold. And this would cause quite a bit of tension whenever it would happen, as surprisingly rare as it was, because if my memory ain't as ass as I think it is, I'm pretty sure he's only been a great ape like twice in the OG Dragon Ball series. 3 times if you count the time before the start of the series that crushed his Gramps. Rest in peace, Grandpa Gohan. You will be missed. When the character gains the power necessary to win the day, but becomes a total wildcard upon using it, that's a great way to create tension in the story. In many other stories, the characters typically are calmed down by a friend or a lover, but in Dragon Ball we just cut off your tail. Or you just pray to all the gods you can if you run into Broly instead. But of course, this isn't the only way a transformation can be used. It can also be used to invoke a feeling of great catharsis, just like with the most iconic transformation in all of fiction, don't at me, Super Saiyan. Everyone was just getting thrashed both physically and emotionally in the case of Vegeta, poor guy, by Frieza. Form after form, beatdown after beatdown. Every time they thought they had Frieza on the ropes, he'd just bust out another transformation and amplify his terrifying strength even further. Then he transforms into his final form, the supposed peak of his strength, and is ready to lay waste to everyone there, just for Goku to finally appear. Goku always appears and saves the day, right? Yeah, not this time unfortunately. He put up the best fight out of anyone else, using nearly everything in his arsenal, only to find out that Frieza wasn't even using half of his strength the entire time. I told you this man was diabolical. With no other options left, everyone makes one final gambit on a spirit bomb, far more powerful than the one they used against Vegeta, to finally put this guy to rest. And it worked! Frieza's gone, the day is saved, and we all have a little laugh together. Frieza appears. Oh no. Pissed off way more than ever before, Frieza stops messing around and just starts offing niggas. Piccolo just gets shot, seemingly dead at first, but don't worry, the Green Man gets better. But Krillin wasn't so lucky. Evidently, Frieza had a personal grievance for little bald men, cause he just blows that poor guy up from the inside out. I know he cut off part of your tail, but Jesus, man. After killing his best friend, seemingly putting an end to his longtime rival, and threatening to do the same to his son, Goku finally snaps, and he finally becomes a Super Saiyan. And what proceeds to happen is one of the most cathartic and satisfying beatdowns in the entire series. Goku even humbles Frieza several times over with his newfound strength, like by allowing Frieza to power up to full strength, just to still beat his ass and leave cause he was bored.
You're not even a challenge to me anymore. It wouldn't be fair for me to keep fighting you. I'm satisfied now. Your pride has been torn to shreds. You've challenged and lost to a fighter who is superior to you, and to make it worse, he's just a monkey, right?
And what was probably the most humiliating to him, having Goku take pity on him and share his energy with him so he could live. As you can imagine, Frieza didn't take too kindly to all of this and tried to return that gift back to sender, but Goku wasn't having any of it, finally putting an end to the tyrant by blasting him with more generosity and kindness. At least until he didn't, but don't worry about that. And just a little tangent here, the way that the anime portrays this shot of Goku after he killed Frieza definitely misunderstood what the manga was showing. Not to be one of those guys, but those expressions display very different emotions and meanings. The anime makes it seem like Goku saying, "You made me do this," while the manga makes it come off more like, "Why did you make me do this?" Such a subtle difference and yet so wildly important. I love Dragon Ball, man. Alright, tangent over. Surely, even with that swift summary, you can understand just why the first Super Saiyan transformation became such a core memory for people, even just a little bit, right? With all that build-up, tension, and payoff, some of which I didn't even include here, they're building up Super Saiyan throughout practically all of the Namek saga. Toriyama really created something special. A real rest in peace to the legend, man. Of course, not every transformation needs that feeling of catharsis, but at least of something to make it feel special, to make it feel powerful, to make it feel necessary. And something which the Super Saiyan transformation kinda lost by the end of the next arc, the Android and Cell saga, because having all the Saiyans gain their Super Saiyan forms actually wasn't the issue in my eyes. I could never blame my goat Trunks for any of this. I would actually say that the Super Saiyan transformation was still powerful for the vast majority of the arc, because Toriyama opted to do something that I personally love to see. They trained the forms themselves, aiming to reach greater heights with what they already had. Vegeta and Trunks aimed to push the power of the form to its limits, while Goku and Gohan opted to gain complete mastery of the form instead. Mastering the powers the characters already have to create something new out of it is one of my favorite things to see. Another side tangent, but while it's not a transformation, it's exactly why I love seeing the growth of Koichi's power throughout the story of My Hero Vigilantes. I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read it, especially with the anime about to come out as of the time of me writing this, but the way that Koichi learns to use his quirk in increasingly inventive ways as time went on was one of my favorite parts of the story. Y'all better watch Vigilantes when it comes out. I'll be watching you to make sure. Using these different variations on their Super Saiyan forms, they did put in work even if they didn't end up winning their fights with it. Vegeta did win his first fight, but you know how it is with Vegeta. He puts that thumb up and you know he's gonna fumble. But regardless, I appreciated the effort to make the most of what they already had. And that power did end up being overshadowed by Gohan's transformation in Super Saiyan 2, but I'd argue this transformation was fine too, especially with the notion that the story was originally supposed to end with the Cell arc. A final push beyond their limits for the end of a story is an extremely exciting way to cap things off. But the story didn't end there, and as much as I love the Buu saga, I'd say this is when things started to get a little out of hand. Alright, so, little recap. Goten and Trunks are Super Saiyans off rip. Goku and Vegeta have Super Saiyan 2, Super Saiyan 2 is useless, and Goku has Super Saiyan 3. Fusion is introduced to Goten and Trunks, their fusion, Gotenks, becomes Super Saiyan 3 by the time of their final fight. Their fusion runs out, Gohan returns with his ultimate form, Mystic if you're an old head. Gohan fumbles the bag again, so Vegeta takes up the mantle, Goku and Vegeta fuse into Vegito. Vegito transforms into Super Vegito, absolutely clowns on the strongest version of Buu, Buuhan, just had to get that out there. Then from there aren't any new transformations, and that's right before the true final battle, one where they just had to use everything they had left in their arsenal to win. A lot to take in, yeah? From how I sounded, you may think I hated this, but I'm most certainly not immune to just chilling out and having fun, even when things are going absolutely nuts. But from a critical standpoint, this was just all over the place. Like, Super Saiyan 2 didn't stand a chance. It got one powerful showing with Gohan against Cell, only to be instantly replaced by Goku in Super Saiyan 3, and essentially worthless against Buu from Gohan and Vegeta's showing of it by the first act of the next arc. When you throw out that many new direct upgrades to previous transformations, especially in rapid succession, the older ones both get no time to breathe and become effectively useless, cause why use those older forms when you can just use the stronger ones with no drawback? Except for Super Saiyan 3 a little bit, since it drains more energy than the other forms, but yeah. And it doesn't get better post Z either. In fact, it gets worse. Like GT introduced what's tied for my favorite Super Saiyan form, with one we'll get to in a second, in Super Saiyan 4. But as you can imagine, having yet another Super Saiyan form just rendered all the other forms effectively worthless. Super Saiyans 1 through 3 were just doo-doo butter now. And Battle of Gods introduced a new realm of power with Super Saiyan God, which is my other favorite Super Saiyan form, by the way. And despite this form eclipsing the power of the other Super Saiyan forms massively, it also got eclipsed itself by the next movie. Literally just never used a single time by the next entry in the series. And on top of that, it got replaced by... It got replaced by a Super Saiyan palette swap, dog. My favorite color, granted, but... man... And despite Super Saiyan God also effectively being yet another direct upgrade, at least it came with some unique traits. It makes the user look more youthful, apparently it provides the ability to heal, and honestly, I think that's about it. Look, I told y'all I'm an easy man to please. Then while it took a good couple arcs before it happened, even Super Saiyan Blue was effectively replaced for Goku at least. I won't be mentioning any manga spoilers here, don't worry fellas, you're safe with me. With the introduction of Ultra Instinct. Now, Ultra Instinct's a bit of a special case, since it's both a technique and a form. And while the form is unique to Goku, the technique itself can still be learned by Goku to use in his other forms. However, the form still exists and still provides a greater power boost than his other forms, so we effectively replace the other transformations once again. The problem with having so many direct upgrade transformations is that it renders each previous form more and more useless as more are introduced. So when the heroes try using lesser forms against foes and start struggling, you don't feel that tension anymore because you're just waiting for them to fully power up instead. You can still feel excitement, sure. I felt that way watching Daima, but you don't really feel any fear that the character will lose because they have a whole sack of power to fall back on that they're just not using yet. Now, Dragon Ball had this issue pretty bad, but allow me to use a quick example of a series I feel handles transformations a bit better, at least for a while. One Piece. For those unaware of One Piece and its MC Luffy, he's a lad that
Yo ho ho, he took a bite of gum gum.
and became a rubber boy and yada yada yada. Let's just skip to the transformations. Essentially, after a certain point in the story, Luffy and his homies were just getting worked by their enemies, in rapid succession at that. So to make sure that he could keep up with the increasing strength of his enemies, he created what he calls gears. Initially just gear 2nd and 3rd. Instead of being simple direct upgrades, these gears had specific uses that both came with their own drawbacks. Gear 2nd works in a similar way to Kaioken, right down to the red tint it bestows upon its users, by allowing Luffy to move faster and stronger for a time while sapping his energy faster than normal, and even shaving off time on his own lifespan. And then Gear 3rd focuses more on raw power by filling his bones with air to inflate his limbs, and this allows him to make some devastatingly powerful strikes at the cost of his maneuverability and, at least pre-time skip, having to deflate after a certain time into a chibi form that renders him effectively powerless. Now, these gears never made the other feel useless, because rather than being straight overall boosts to his ability, each gear had a specific use, a scenario where one shines better than the other. Plus, he couldn't just spam them because of the drawbacks that they had initially. A great way to circumvent the Super Saiyan upgrade issue. Then, centuries later, he created another gear in Gear 4th, which essentially acted as a direct upgrade to the previous gears by being both stronger and faster than them. Hell, the man can even fly now. But it had a much stricter time limit and a devastating drawback, at least initially. At first, whenever his time limit was up, he'd deflate, be extremely worn out, and would be unable to use any of the world's main power system, Haki. Which, to put it in layman's terms, for those of you that might not know what Haki is, where Luffy and his squad are by this point in the story, if you can't use Haki, you are cooked. So it's extremely dangerous to be unable to use it for any amount of time. This way, he knows that he can't just use Gear 4th all willy-nilly, because if he doesn't end the fight right then and there, he's a dead man. But eventually he basically overcomes this weakness for the most part, which I find to be a bit of a shame. But in the same arc that this weakness basically goes away, Oda introduced a new aspect to Gear 4th. When it was initially introduced, Luffy announced his new Gear 4th with the epithet Bound Man, or Bounce Man in English, I think, because he's unable to stop bouncing in this form. But since this was all we saw for a good while, we didn't really have a reason to think too much deeper than that. But in the next arc, we find out that he's created side grades to Gear 4th as well. The first being Tank Man, which effectively boosts his rubbery defenses while sacrificing his mobility. And then my second favorite form of his, Snake Man, which sacrifices his defenses for a vast increase in speed. He essentially gave himself a spectrum of forms with a base form of balance in Bound Man, a greater defense at the cost of speed in Tank Man, and a greater speed at the cost of defense in Snake Man. While the loss of the harsher drawbacks ended up making Gear 2nd and 3rd a bit more worthless, essentially with basically every major enemy requiring him to use 4th off rip now, I did appreciate what Oda was doing with Gear 4th here. If 2nd and 3rd were basically being phased out, at least I could enjoy some diversity in Gear 4th. Even though Tankman was only used once, but don't worry about it, don't worry about it. But then this was kind of thrown out by the addition of his most recent, and ironically my favorite gear, Gear 5th. An extremely powerful gear that basically lets Luffy turn into a Looney Tunes character and just do whatever he wants. But only similar to a Looney Tunes character. There's no Luffy that beats Bugs Bunny and his Toon Force, it's just the way of the world. This one does have a similar drawback to what Gear 4th initially had, wherein it wears him the hell out after 5 minutes, but he can still kick in some more juice occasionally, or if he gets some food to eat. The main problem here is that this gear is so powerful that after its introduction, it effectively became the only form he'd use in fights, even ones where he really doesn't need all that. It ended up sidelining all the previous gears, not even always out of necessity for increasing threats. It was self-inflicted. But that's enough out of me on that. If I don't stop myself, I will yap on and on about my interest, bro. I gotta start putting limiters on myself. Yap limiters. Essentially what I'm getting at here is that you can circumvent the power creep of constant direct upgrade transformations by either adding increasingly severe restrictions or drawbacks to the greater upgrades, creating side grades instead of upgrades that can serve different functions, or having the upgrades be temporary additions to that character's arsenal. To harp back on Dragon Ball just one more time, they actually did kind of implement the can serve different functions trait to the God and Blue forms a bit. Initially in the manga by Vegeta against Goku Black, and then used briefly by Goku in the anime's version of Tournament of Power, they made it a note to say that Blue can't operate at full power for very long, but the God form is still rather powerful while not being anywhere near as draining. So to circumvent this issue, they'd start using the God form to maneuver around and towards the enemy, then quickly swap to Blue at the moment that they'd strike, cause this way they could both conserve their general energy and preserve the explosive full power of Blue. A fairly simple use, but a use nonetheless, and it gives a proper reason to use both forms. And I yapped for all this time, all this probably around 20 minutes or so, or I don't know, I can't see the recording time while I'm writing. But all of this was just to put that knowledge towards Sonic the motherfucking Hedgehog. Let's go! See now, the Sonic franchise and super forms used to be like this. Introduced in Sonic 2, we had this man going Super Saiyan before Super Saiyan existed, don't fact check that, with Super Sonic. It was a reward to the player for beating all 7 special stages and collecting 50 rings at any time, allowing the player to blast through faster, be invincible, and to stay in the form until either they got smushed, fell off the stage, or ran out of rings. Somehow, it still doesn't let him swim or breathe underwater though. Super form my ass, more like super fraud. But, to give you a bit of backstory here, Sonic 3 was gonna be a ginormous game. So much so that the devs couldn't complete the whole game in time for its release date. So instead, they split the game up into 2. Sonic 3 to come out on time, and Sonic and Knuckles to come out a little bit later. Then in an attempt to recreate the original vision, they added lock-on technology for Sonic and Knuckles to basically allow you to fuse the games into one supreme being, Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Amazing quality of these games aside, both of these games had the super forms for the characters available. Super Sonic, actually not Tails, he got gimped, and Knuckles. But they felt like they had to reward the player with something new after combining them into such a long experience. So if you had the 7 Chaos Emeralds in hand in the Sonic and Knuckles section of the game, with the next time you try to enter a special stage, it instead transport you to a special section of the Hidden Palace Zone. And here, the shrine would yank your emeralds away and transform them into the new Super Emeralds, albeit depowered. This would take away your ability to transform into your super form and make you have to do 7 more special stages, but if you completed those stages again, this time the game rewarded you with the hyper forms, essentially the super forms on steroids. As a baseline, all the hyper forms are even faster than the super forms and even leave after images when you start zooming, so that just moves it up 10 more points above the super forms just on the coolness scale. But it also gave them all new abilities. Like, Hypersonic gains the abilities to plow through walls that previously only Knuckles could destroy. So, Knuckles is stronger than Supersonic? Food for thought. Anyways, you could also instantly wipe out all enemies on the screen, and most importantly, he can finally breathe underwater. That's my GOAT right there. Nothing else matters. But Tails and Knuckles get their flowers too. Like, Knuckles can now slam into walls when he glides to blow up all enemies on screen, and breathe underwater, God bless. Tails is a bit of a special case, because he didn't actually have a super form initially. So his hyper form is basically just his super form for this game. But anyhow, he doesn't get a screen wipe like his comrades, or the ability to breathe underwater. Like, damn, they hated this nigga. What'd he do? But you know what? At least he gains an army of super flickies around him. And those niggas go to town, bro. If there's an enemy around, it's on sight, boss or not. He may not have gained the abilities that his homies did, but he did gain shooters, so is that really a loss? So with these rad-ass abilities in the form of what's essentially a direct upgrade to the super form, basically the Super Saiyan 2 of the Sonic franchise, surely they became a mainstay, right? Well, the hyper forms never made a return ever again. And if your name didn't end with the Hedgehog, you weren't even getting a super form to begin with. This was dastardly, bruh. Why would they make something so cool only to never reintroduce it? Well, we got a bit of an answer to that in recent years. Not to the reason why the other characters don't get super forms anymore though. They're just racist against non-hedgehogs, I guess. To sum it up, they wanted to avoid the very power creep issue that I mentioned before with Dragon Ball as a main example. They didn't want the super form to feel lesser or worthless. A fair reason not to reintroduce the hyper forms, I suppose, but damn it, we can fix this. For example, they could add a greater tax to the hyper form. Like by having it drain your rings twice as fast or something. Or to make the challenge to unlock it rather hard. But not this doo-doo ass 100% the game to unlock the super form foolishness that they started doing in the 2010s. Why would I want to use this uber powerful form after I've beaten everything in the game to completion? Don't piss me off, bro. I will drop my nutsack on your forehead. Personally, I think it should be similar to how it was in the classic games, wherein you could unlock both the super and hyper forms before the end of the game, bonus points if unlocking either one of them allows you to reach a hidden boss, though aiming to get the hyper form requires you to lose your super form. What that series of challenges could be, I don't know, let Sonic Team figure it out, I'm lazy. But they could just do something else, something they actually did a fair bit in the 2000s, and once more in the last Sonic Frontiers DLC. Just give us an uber powerful form tied to that game. In Secret Rings and Black Knight, you could fight the true final boss after completing a series of challenges. With Black Knight, it honestly felt more like just continuing the story past the initial credits, while Secret Rings had you collect, well, all the secret rings. Doing so allowed you to fight the real final boss of the game, as well as giving Sonic a snazzy new form to act as a replacement to the super form in that game, with Darkspine Sonic for Secret Rings and Excalibur Sonic for Black Knight, both my beloveds. Sonic Frontiers' final DLC revived this tradition after nearly 2 decades without it, by having the whole DLC involve Sonic going through certain trials to master the power of a new form, while his homies went around to collect the Chaos Emeralds for him. This would accumulate in his new form, Super Sonic 2, or Starfall Supersonic if you want to be official, but the Dragon Ball parallels, man. Admittedly, I feel like they could have went harder on the design for it, since they just gave him a stronger aura and blue eyes for the actual boss fight, but in the cutscene preceding that fight, he actually does let loose all the cyber power he had for a few seconds, creating this blue cyber form that we should have done the boss fight in my humble opinion, but I digress. Either way, they showed us right there one of the few formulas that could work for either adding in new forms or bringing back old ones right there. Making them special to the game they're in is one of the ways to do it. And despite the form's visuals being a bit of a letdown in Frontiers, I give them props for having it be a direct upgrade to the super form compared to the other games where it was kind of more of a replacement instead, because it really ups the danger factor of the enemy that they're facing. Fighting a foe that we know the super form isn't enough for just makes it that much more intimidating. I love it, man. However, there's still one more method they could always add, and to explain this one, allow me to talk about Kingdom Hearts 2 for a quick second. See, in Kingdom Hearts 2, there are these things called drive forms that Sora can use. Essentially, transformations that all use their own amounts of meter, called the drive meter in the game, with the stronger ones typically using more, but each form having their own unique strengths. For example, Valor is more physical oriented, restricting the player's access to magic, but vastly improves your melee combat prowess and grants access to a second Keyblade. Meanwhile, Wisdom is more magic oriented, vastly improving Sora's magical abilities while taking away his ability to do normal attacks, instead being replaced with a bullet shot. And then there's also the Limit Form, Master Form, and Final Form that all have their own immense power, but still fairly different playstyles to them to fit however the person prefers to play. But along with these forms is one secret form, the Anti-Form. Now this isn't a form that the player can select, it's one that can randomly appear whenever the player attempts to enter a drive form. Except for Final Form, but... And that random chance increases the more times in a row that you successfully enter a drive form, until it resets after failing to, entering Anti-Form instead. To some players, the Anti-Form is a curse because it takes away your access to all magic and defensive abilities. But the damage that you can unleash with this thing is actually pretty nutty. It can be scary to use, but if you learn how to use it, it can actually be a pretty powerful form in its own right. And if you were anyone who is aware of a certain short event that happened in Sonic X, you might know where I'm about to go with this. Add Dark Sonic to the games, damn it! But as a sort of berserker form, like with our buddy Anti-Form. I feel like this would fit especially well in a Frontiers-like game or an RPG, since those would have more focus on combat. Having a high-risk, high-reward form that you could transform into over the safer but weaker form of Supersonic would be a fun change of pace in my eyes. It gives a reason for both forms to be used, mainly depending on the type of player that you are, or maybe even the situation you're in. Am I using this as an opportunity to pitch my child self's favorite form to Sonic Team? Yes, 100% I am. Put him in even one game, ya nincompoops. I bet you guys thought I was gonna say nigga, huh? But to wrap things up, I'm just a sucker for transformations. They're fun, they're hip, they're cool, but even with as easy as I am to please, I love it even more when they can actually pull it off right. Dropping direct transformation after transformation ends up making the ones before it feel useless, especially if it's in rapid succession like with what happened to Super Saiyan 2. So I can understand Sonic Team's apprehension at adding the hyper form back in all willy-nilly. But at the same time, with long-running franchises especially, if you just stick to the one transformation over and over again, it can start to feel stale and lose its luster. Personally, despite it being the first time in a long time that the super form was actually story relevant, I kind of felt that way with the super form against the Titan bosses in the main story of Frontiers. But do not misunderstand me, those fights were hype and fun as hell. It's just that, looking back, it seems kinda lame to have the 3 main bosses lose to the super form, and then have the final boss lose to it as well, despite being the real looming threat behind the entire game. Granted, he got some help from Sage to fight him, and he still had to give it his all to win, but I've got an agenda to push here, alright? Allow me. That's why I did appreciate them giving Sonic a power boosted super form to beat the end in the DLC's alternate ending. Even when those forms are one-offs, they're really fun and raise the stakes in the moments they appear. And it doesn't even need to have a story reason like that. I'd be more than happy with just a hyper-esque form a la Sonic 3. It doesn't even have to be hypersonic. Like I said before, we gotta bring back the formula of letting you achieve your super form pre-endgame and having that let you reach the true ending of the game. That formula worked perfectly well in my eyes, and I'd love to see that make a comeback. And then on top of that, I'd appreciate if they just sprinkle in the Sonic 3 and Knuckles method of you choosing to give up your super form to achieve the more powerful hyper-esque form instead. Just let it be that you can choose what form to go into once you achieve it, and add a greater downside to the hyper-esque form than the super form, so it gives players at least some reason to not always just jump into the stronger form if they want. See, basically what I'm trying to say here, guys, is just give everybody their super forms back, damn it. No more of this superpowers bullshit.